What's good, everyone? Matt here from UK Nets Fans, and we're back. I'm joined by Aidan McConaughey and Cammy Anderson for another episode of BK to UK, the British Brooklyn Nets podcast. Today is Monday, the 29th of November, and we're chatting about the news that Joe Harris is getting ankle surgery. We're going to spread some love about DeAndre Bembry, and of course, we're going to recap all the games from this past week and much, much more. Make sure you're following us on Twitter and Instagram at UK Nets Fans, the pod itself on Twitter at BK to UK Pod, and check us out on YouTube where you can watch back all of our episodes. With that out of the way, let's get into it. And so, as I say, we're recording on Monday, and 3 hours before we're supposed to record, the news comes out via Woj that Joe Harris is going to miss some time to undergo some surgery. Cammy, your initial thoughts?
Not ideal at all. Joe is going to leave a big gap in this team. Yes, we've been without him for a few games. We've managed to win without him. He still plays a really big role in this team. He has the third highest minutes per game behind only KD and Harden. So it really is quite a big minutes gap to fill. He's the Nets' third most and second most if you don't count Kessler Edwards, who's played like 2 games. So he's the third most efficient shooter on the season, although what I found interesting, despite his efficiency, he is only actually a 5th highest scorer, so maybe losing him isn't as bad as maybe it would have been in previous seasons where he was averaging more points, but obviously when you've got a guy like Joe Harris who can shoot the free ball so well, you're always going to miss him. Thankfully, we've got Patty Mills filling in quite nicely, and like I say, I've managed to win games despite Joe's absence, and with a bit of luck, Joe returns closer to the 4-week mark opposed to the 8-week mark. And I think it goes without saying that the Nets are a much better and more dangerous team with Joey Buckets involved. So let's hope that he's back, fighting fit, and then perfect kind of condition for the playoffs in a few months' time.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one because it kind of came out of the blue today. I certainly didn't expect it. But thinking back in recent years, the Nets it's not the first time they've announced something like this unexpectedly. Obviously, D'Angelo Russell and Spencer Dinwiddie are 2 guys that have went under surgery for kind of minor things during the season that Nets fans maybe felt that they would have been back quite soon, and then they announced that, and then it just adds further time onto that timetable, which is a bit disappointing, but they obviously felt that he needed to get this operation. And you'd rather it now than be later on in the season, obviously nearer to the playoffs. As Cammy says, it is a huge blow for the Nets, especially with some tough games coming up in the next month or so when we do need as many shooters as possible, especially when James Harden's really struggling at the moment and we just need as much space as possible so he can do his thing. But I'd say it's probably, as Cammy said again, it isn't the end of the world because we do have other guys there at the moment. So maybe the Nets felt that they can deal without having Joe Harris for another month or so. But yeah, I think I read earlier on that they are hoping that it's going to be more to the early side of that timetable that we saw, obviously 4 to 8 weeks. If he's out for 4 weeks, I've had a quick look at our schedule for the next 4 weeks. It's not too bad at all. Maybe if he is out for that second month, we may drop a few other games because we don't have him there. But yeah, it's just Nash said a couple of nights ago that Joe was making good progress with his injury, and then they announced that he's getting surgery. It shows maybe that he's not in the loop as much with these things than we'd like to hope. So yeah, it does make you ask questions, but if it's not Brooklyn Nets, if we're not asking questions every single time we're on this podcast.
That's it. And we're going to come to a listener question a little later on about the communication and the medical team that we've got and how seemingly everyone is still supposed to be out for ages for everything. But big shout to Theo, who I didn't know he had a PhD, but turns out he says a bad sprain can, because obviously Joe Harris went down originally with this ankle. It was an ankle sprain. It looked like he rolled it or something. And Theo said that in his experience, a bad sprain can pull a piece of bone away called an avulsion fracture. And that sounds like the bit of bone that got pulled out needs taken out with a procedure. So, it possibly, maybe because it was like super sort of blown up and swollen and stuff. Maybe they couldn't see, but it's pointless sort of speculating about it now. But yeah, as you guys have both mentioned, Joe Harris, we've always waxed lyrical about Joe, even though obviously how the last year in the playoffs wasn't great. He's obviously not scoring as many points as he has been previously, and he got paid recently as well. So all those kind of combine into a bit more of Joe Harris underneath the microscope this season. So while we've got the personnel that can spread the floor and create that gravity and pull open the lane for our other players, then maybe it's all right that if Joe's going to go down, then this is probably an ideal time. I can't actually remember Joe Harris really being down for that one with anything else. I think he's pretty, unless you guys can remember anything, I think he's been pretty durable for his time as a net. But yeah, obviously just wishing him the best kind of recovery as possible, and hopefully get that rest and he'll be back. And as you guys say, fully fit and firing. But there's a Nets fan that I follow on Twitter who also happens to be a medical professional, which is incredibly useful. But Neeraj Patel, who's a Nets fan, and I think he is a child doctor, but he's also like a doctor for children. His Twitter bio says kid bone / ligament fixer. So he knows what he's talking about. And he said, basically the Nets didn't actually from Nets Daily that I didn't see, Nets did not disclose the grade of Harris ankle surgery on 3-grade scale. The 3 is the worst. So I've just seen that as we're talking, which isn't great. So this Neeraj Patel says grading refers to the degree of ligament plus injury. In this case, surgery is most likely related to something besides the ligament, i.e. cartilage damage or loose fragments. If ligament reconstruction repair was the plan, no way he'd be back in 4 to 8 weeks as reported. So it does sound like a super bad sprain that has dislodged something, but probably not like a full ligament reconstruction. So it could have been a heck of a lot worse, but obviously we want to see Joe back. So that was a bit of a waffly way to say it is obviously serious, but yeah, I think we'll be fine. Obviously we're doing all right. He hasn't played this week. When did he go? I think he didn't play this week. He went down
2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
2 weeks
so
ago
he's
yesterday.
Yeah, he's been out the team a little while, and we're still doing okay. So wishing the best of luck, but I think we'll be all right. We're a deep enough team to combat this adversity. But a big part of that depth is a certain Mr. DeAndre Bembry, and we just thought it would be a nice moment to, we're about a quarter of the way through the season, so we just thought it'd be a nice moment to just kind of shine a light on this diamond in the rough. And Aidan, has Sean Marks done it again?
Yeah, I think he has done it again. I think it's safe to say now. And going back to the off-season, the start of the season, I remember when that DeAndre Jordan trade went down and me and Cammy done our 15 minutes or less on that trade. I think both of us were probably saying that DeAndre Bembry was probably one of the guys that were most likely to get cut back then. I mean, we didn't know too much about him as a player. Obviously, we hadn't seen him in the court for the Nets at that point. And we saw Doumbouya and Okafor even potentially with a better chance coming into the team than DeAndre Bembry, which does show how low we were on him. But I've never been more glad to be wrong. I love what he brings to the team. His role just seems to fit in seamlessly what the Nets are trying to do at the moment. And I just feel he's one of those glue guys that's crucial to have around when you are competing for a championship. So, yeah, I mean, we say it every year with one guy, Sean Marks, has just got such a good eye for talent. And he sees things that maybe other guys miss. And he just got such a good eye for maybe someone that should have a bigger role somewhere. And obviously we saw it with Bruce Brown last year. We've seen it with Joe Harris, Spencer Dinwiddie. The list is endless. And Bembry just seems to be that latest guy that just shows how talented Marks in the front office is at picking up these guys. And obviously we've seen 2 superb performances from Bembry this week. And he's obviously in the starting lineup now. So competition for placing that starting 5 is heating up. And when you've got guys coming back, obviously Joe Harris in a month, Who knows? We might even see Kyrie Irving down the line. We're not going to talk about that one, but Bembry's he's got his position in that starting five now, and it's his to lose. And I say that about 5 or 6 guys that have been in the starting lineup this year. So it's nice to have that depth there, and it's a good opportunity for these guys to come in and show what they can do.
Yeah, I mean, Bembry isn't a guy who's going to get bucket after bucket, night after night. But to be fair to him, he has been solid when he has shot the ball. He's actually our second best shooter with a 56% field goal percentage and an efficient field goal percentage of just above 60%. But really, I think it's his defence that's impressed us most. He was really, really impressive in that Celtics game, especially against Tatum and Brown. Just locked them up and was key in them having really, really poor nights by their standards. And Steve Nash as well was clearly a big fan of him after the Celtics game. He'd said something along the lines of, he's a guy who can guard the number one option on another team. So to me, in a roundabout way, Steve Nash is saying he can be the best defender in this Nets team. And coming into the season, like Aidan says, none of us were really that high on him. None of us were really aware on him. Just like Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown obviously turned out really good defensively and just really good in general. And it seems like Marks has done it again. Bembry is kind of showing that kind of grit, and we don't really need him to be scoring tons each night. It's obviously nice when he does have those big games like he has recently, but it's really his defensive acumen that we need, and it's something that certainly can't be looked over for a guy that's on a vet minimum deal. It's not even a guaranteed contract. It's just yet another steal we've got, and fingers crossed he can keep this form up and we can guarantee that contract kind of come the time it needs to be guaranteed.
Yeah, I saw, I think it was during the Suns game, I think it was one of the Nets accounts, I think it was Nets Daily, saying that his money isn't guaranteed until January. And I was like, you guarantee that man money. Because yeah, he's been absolutely phenomenal is a word that gets used a lot. Normally comes out of my mouth, but he's been great, like really, really good. He's just that pure energy and hustle and heart and effort kind of guy. Like, you don't have to be, effort is, you don't need to have any talent. You can still put 100% effort in. Obviously, he's supremely talented and an NBA player, but like, he just doesn't quit. I've had a little look through like the last 3 games, his per 100 possession numbers, because like he's kind of been in and out, as you say, he's kind of got that starting spot now. But per 100 possessions that he's in, he's scoring 19.6 points on 65% shooting. He's grabbing 12.3 rebounds. 3.5 of those are offensive rebounds. He's also dishing 1.7 assists, 2.8 steals, and 1.1 blocks. So, like you said, like I remember when we podded about it, like going into the season, it was like he's supposed to be this kind of really aggressive kind of defender, and that's absolutely turned out to be. But he can score as well. He's always out in transition. He's always cut into the basket. He loves a little reverse dunk as well, which I'm a huge fan of. Love a little bit of that. But yeah, it's just, he reminds me a bit of Bruce Brown from last year. And between Bembry and Brown, I think we're always going to have that sort of level of just dogged defensiveness that is just going to give people trouble. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of DeAndre Bembry. And I think I need a DeAndre Bembry jersey. That's how much I love this guy. I think he's that next Nets cult hero, I think, if it keeps coming up. Which is weird because we've got some bona fide superstars on this team, but I think Nets fans still love like a guy that gets 8 minutes a game and absolutely delivers. But yeah, massive love for DeAndre Bembry. But let's get back on track and let's talk some Nets basketball. So cast your mind back to Tuesday, midnight tip in the UK. Game 18 on the season is at the Cavs, when the Nets obviously played the Cavs a couple of days before. We beat them then. We beat them again that day, 117 to 112. And Cammy, I think you're going to start with the man from Down Under.
Yes, I am. I'm going to sing the praises of Patty Mills once again. Every week we seem to sing the praises of Kevin Durant. At least one of us does in one game. But now Patty Mills, one of the blue-collar boys, is becoming a regular feature, at least in one of every game recap. Patty Mills has been in some fine form lately, especially from 3-point land. And in this one, he was superb. 6 of 12 attempts from deep. Currently the best 3-point shooter in the team with a 50% success rate, which is insane. Seen a stat from Nets Daily after this one that he's on course for 250 3-pointers this year. He's currently on 64. And upon seeing this, I was like, let's see some digging. Let's see what the kind of franchise kind of record is. The record is currently D-Lo with 234. So, I mean, yeah, if Patty Mills manages to become the franchise leader in 3 points made, even above Joe Harris, who I think we all regard as a better 3-point shooter than Patty Mills coming into the season, yeah, I mean, that would be a fantastic story for Patty Mills. Forgetting the fact he was quite quiet in the loss to the Suns later on in the week of just 9 points. Everyone's new favourite Aussie. He's been really, really consistent lately. He's averaging 18 points over the last 5 games. And yeah, with Joe Harris out, we needed someone to really step up. And Patty Mills is more than doing that at the moment. So long live Patty Mills. And yeah, keep this form up, please.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about a guy that's kind of taken Patty Mills' role a wee bit coming off the bench since he's moved into the starting lineup. And yeah, I'm going to sing the praises again of a guy who've been talking about loads recently, and it's Cam Thomas. I just think that this game against the Cavs just really felt like the first time Cam looked like an NBA player, because he's been a bit of a novelty so far, just because everyone's been so excited for his minutes. He just sometimes feels like that guy that you'll let off with anything, like making the odd mistake, you'll just be like, oh, it's fine, like you'll get the next one. But I think now you can look at him and his confidence, he just looks like he's been there for years now, and he's only played about 2 or 3 games, like actual real minutes in the team. But yeah, he kept the Nets in this game at times. He only played 14 minutes, but he had 11 points, including 2 threes. And he's doing all right from 3 so far. And it wasn't actually a massive part of his game in college. And I remember when the Nets drafted him, there was kind of some worries that his 3-point game might have let him down a little bit when he came into the league. But he's been fantastic since he's came in from 3. So, I mean, the highlight in this one from him, he scored 8 points in a 9-0 run during the third quarter, which is when the Cavs were kind of really getting back into that game before that, kind of going out with going into halftime and then coming out. But he was just superb, and he just led the Nets. So he led that bench mob and kept everyone calm, especially when the Cavs were doing not too bad at all. He also got a block as well, which is always nice to see from a young guard. But yeah, he said after the game, he was interviewed, and he said, I got in, I knew the game plan, knew what I had to do, I got open looks, and I made most of them. And I just think that's nice confidence from Cam. He knows what he's got to do. He comes in, you can tell that he does his homework before games. He doesn't look lost defensively, which is quite common for young guards, but he's not going to go back to Long Island anytime soon in my eyes. I think he's definitely got his place in this rotation. And yeah, he's just been absolutely solid. So I'm chuffed to bits for him.
Yeah, it's nice. The thing that gets me about Cam is that, like, even if he's having the night of his life, he's just completely stone-faced. Just doesn't show any emotion. He's just a basketball playing robot. And like, he's not phased. He's not bothered. He's not happy. He's not sad. He's just like an absolute android. So yeah, long live Cam. What a guy. From one guy that we bleat about, well, from 2 guys we bleat about every week to another. I want to talk again about Lamarcus Aldridge, but this time in the context of just like the wider scope between our front court rotation and how that kind of started to change during this Cavs game. We're beginning to see a bit of a gulf between Lamarcus Aldridge, who's been absolutely incredible, and the other bigs on our team, or what constitutes a big on the Brooklyn Nets. And I think this has just been magnified because of how good Lamarcus Aldridge has been, and not necessarily how poorly Blake Griffin, or in this case, Paul Millsap, have been across this season. LMA has been very good. He's averaging 13.8 points, 5.9 rebounds in 22 minutes. But yeah, he's the most effective mid-range shooter in the NBA. He just looks automatic when he gets to his spots. He had 21 points in the Cavs game and 11 rebounds, shooting 71% from the floor in 34 minutes. It was a bit of a weird one because Blake and Millsap both played 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes in this game. So obviously Blake was in this starting lineup and got pulled. So I don't know if you guys know what happened there or if it was just a bad matchup or something, but we didn't see any more Blake. So yeah, and obviously Paul Millsap hasn't been able to join the team because of personal reasons he's been out with, so he hasn't quite found his fit or found his kind of momentum, I should say. I think without Griffin and Millsap performing and us still waiting on Claxton to come back, obviously have no really further updates from him that I've seen. We're going to be relying heavily on Lamarcus Aldridge, and I just hope that he can keep up his form and hope that he stays available because, you know, I don't want to see any more Kevin Durant at the 5, you know, if possible, when we've made all these moves and stuff like that. We're going to get to another listener question towards the end of the pod about potential free agent targets. And maybe that's something we'll go over in another pod. But yeah, it's still an area of concern on this Nets team, especially how we always keep getting absolutely battered on the boards with second chance rebounds and second chance points. So that's just something I'm keeping an eye on. But thank goodness for Lamarcus Aldridge because that Cavs team were a big team as well. So it was really good to have him in there as well. But I've been looking. This has been my favorite game of the week. Thursday, the 25th, game 19 on the season, tipped off at 12:30. The Nets absolutely battering the Celtics in Boston. It's always nice to chat about the Celtics getting beat. And yeah, rolling on from all that Blake Griffin chat, he got sat down for this one, Aidan.
Yeah, before I let you guys wax lyrical on how good the Nets were in this one, because we were extremely good against the Celtics. Just something to note, obviously, this is Blake Griffin's first did not play coach's decision as a Net, and Steve Nash has been asked this a couple of times this year already. When I remember Lamarcus Aldridge didn't play for a long time against the Warriors, and they asked, "Oh, is he injured? Is he injured?" And they know exactly why the reporters ask these questions, because they want good answers. And Steve Nash was asked again, "Is Blake injured? Why is he not in the starting lineup?" And yeah, they said that he wasn't injured. It was just their decision to not play him. And we didn't see Blake Griffin at all that night. And it's just an interesting one because obviously me and Cammy both backed Blake Griffin to be the most improved Net this year. And it's fair to say that his season has just been so underwhelming, which is really disappointing just considering how important he was on the Nets last year, especially come playoff time. You'd probably go as far to say he was the third most important player for a large part of that Bucks series. And I mean, he's still doing the dirty work. He's still doing the help defending. He's still taking his charges, blue collar boys and all that. But overall, defensively, he has been really, really poor. And that was exposed massively in that Warriors game. And his shooting has just been absolutely woeful. I couldn't even tell you the last time he made a 3-pointer. I think it's been quite a long time now. But yeah, Steve Nash ran with Aldridge starting at the 5, who played really well. And James Johnson and Paul Millsap saw minutes at the 5 as well, coming off the bench. Daron Sharp even saw a few minutes at the end, which says a lot about Blake Griffin not playing, considering Steve Nash's angst against old school big men, considering that he played Daron Sharp before that he played Blake. So I don't know. I don't think Blake's out the rotation for good. I think potentially when Joe Harris comes back into the rotation and we don't need that extra shooter on the court like Lamarcus Aldridge, potentially we will see him come back in then. But for now, it's just a case that he needs to keep his head up and stay ready, because you've seen it happen before across the league where guys with Blake does have a big ego, and he rightfully does have a big ego because he's had a great career. But sometimes players like that get these do not plays and they just get frustrated, and then they start to cause disruption. I don't think he's that type of guy, but he won't be happy that he's not playing at the moment. And hopefully he can impress Steve Nash in practice and get back into this rotation somehow.
So after Aidan kind of starting this in a bit of a downer, I'm going to bring the mood right back up and celebrate the fact that we managed to keep Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown quiet. These are two young, up-and-coming stars in this league, and we managed to make them have some of their worst performances of the year, and that was due to our excellent defending. We'd already mentioned earlier on, DeAndre Bembry was absolutely phenomenal up against the pair of them. They really did not get things going whatsoever in this one. And it goes without saying the Celtics have some very good players in the team, and if you can keep them quiet, it certainly bodes well for your chances of winning. And yeah, we done exactly that with both Tatum and Brown, even if Marcus Smart did get, 20-ish points. But we kept Tatum to just 15 points and Brown to 13. That, looking at some stats, was Tatum's fourth lowest scoring night of the season and Brown's second lowest of the season. Tatum shot just 25% from the field and only managed 1 of 9 from three-point land. Brown was 33% from the field and failed to take any of his 8 3-point attempts. So credit has to go to the team. It's always nice when you're able to prevent the opposition stars going off against you. We've seen so many times with the Nets getting absolutely burned by not even necessarily stars, just kind of what you'd say would be like a kind of Diddy, just some nobody will pop up with 30, 35 points, but it feels all that much sweeter when it's guys who've caused you bother in the past. And yeah, even better again when you come away with a nice win too. Like Aidan says, we were absolutely excellent in this one, and the defense, we've had some problems throughout the season, but defense certainly wasn't an issue at all in this game.
Nice. Yeah, it was one of those, we finished strong and we started strong, we finished even stronger. An absolute pantsing in Boston. As you guys say, like, it's normally someone goes off. Obviously, in the playoffs last year when we played them in that series, it was a gentleman's sweep. They only beat us when Jason Tatum went off for was it 40 or was it 50? I'm not sure, but he scored a lot of points in that game. But yeah, as you quite rightly said, we absolutely put the clamps on him. So I think it was just a nice it was the most complete performance, I think, against a Boston team that obviously isn't the greatest competition, and obviously we are a league above them in terms of where we're sitting in the standings and in the NBA generally. But I just wanted to shout out just some quick highlights from what I've seen. Again, going back to Patty Mills, he scored 7 threes. He's now had 7 or more threes in a game for the 3rd time this season already. He's hit 7 or more threes in a game only 3 times in his first 12 seasons combined. And now he's done it all already as a net. He's drilling threes at 50.5%. And since Joe Harris has been out, he's upped it to 54.5%, which is just crazy numbers on the volume. Yeah, 5 players in double digits for this game. KD, James Harden, Lamarcus Aldridge, Patty Mills, and Killer Cam. The Nets were just incredibly efficient on offense, 50% from the floor and 40% as a team from 3. So everything was falling. Great to see James Harden getting to the line again. And a little tidbit that I'm not sure if you guys know, but following this Boston game, the Nets had the best road record in the NBA, which is, good to know. I did not. To take a leaf out of Michael Grady's book, I did not know that. So yeah, I thought that was just a nice little way to round off that Celtics performance, because yeah, really, really good to see. No notes, no sort of minuses for that one. But talking about minuses, we rounded off the week with a game against the Suns, which was incredibly annoying when you kind of sit up and watch it. The red hot team in the Suns with the biggest active NBA win streak. It was 15 at the time. Spoiler alert, it's now 16. Against a team that was flying in the East. So it was supposed to be a really, really competitive game. The final score does flatter it somewhat, but it finished the Suns 113, the Nets 107. And we keep losing to good teams, don't we?
Unfortunately, that is the case. Once again, we found ourselves on the losing side against one of the best teams in the league. Now, of course, we're one of the best teams in the league. We're currently sitting at the top of the Eastern Conference after a quarter of the season played. Yet, when it comes to testing ourselves against the teams that we might be facing in the finals, we keep falling short. Firstly, it was the Warriors in that very forgettable drubbing a few games ago. Now it was the Suns, and like you say, the kind of final score flatters it. We did have quite a good fourth quarter. We had 35 points to their low 20s. So we certainly cut into that deficit. But if I recall correctly, we didn't even lead once in this one. And yeah, it's so frustrating when, yeah, we've got our issues, but it's just how, like, you've got to be able to start winning these games if we're to be serious contenders. And it sounds like we're throwing the toys at the pram. Like I say, we're winning the East as things stand. It's a historically good franchise record start to the season. We really shouldn't be complaining with losses. But when we're doing so well, you can only feel a bit annoyed by the fact we're not beating the teams that we kind of not necessarily should be beaten, because they're in the positions there for a reason. But it's the fact we've been beaten by the two best in the West already, either of whom we could ultimately face in the finals. It gives me a little bit of worry. Still, obviously, 3/4 of the season to go, still plenty of time to iron things out and possibly redeem ourselves. But all I can hope is that we can learn from these kind of defeats and we'll approach future games against them, whether it's in the regular season or in the playoffs, just differently, because whatever way we're approaching these games at the moment doesn't seem to be working. That's 2 games we've been outplayed and not really at our best. So yeah, just need to really up our game. And it was disappointing, especially after how well we played against the Celtics, to then kind of go down in this one.
Yeah, like Matt, I stayed up to watch this one, and it is extremely disappointing when you stay up that late and see the Nets play like that. But yeah, sometimes I don't watch the game and I wake up in the morning, and like a lot of UK Nets fans, we hop on the NBA app, check the box score to see how our guy's done. And if he did do that on this occasion, it may have looked like James Harden had quite a good night. I mean, he had a triple-double, he had a few blocks, he had some steals. But on the NBA app, if you slide to the right just a wee bit, you'll see how James Harden's night really went, and he was pretty awful in this one. I mean, he had 4 for 15 shooting, 0 from 6 from 3, with 7 turnovers. And when I say turnovers, he had 7, but it felt like about 20, because some of the turnovers we saw was just so poor. And it was just lazy passes, even just a lack of care when dribbling, which is something you don't relate to James Harden. It's because he's just one of the best point guards in the NBA, if not the best, at being a true point guard. But he made Bridges look like he was some form of defensive phenomenon when he really wasn't. It was Harden giving away cheap balls, and Bridges was just picking up every time. And yeah, it just wasn't a good night from Harden. Obviously, last year against the Suns, we saw one of his best performances of a net during that comeback. And this wasn't like that one at all. He came out afterwards. He said that he was asked about his hamstring to see if that's potentially still an issue, and he said it was perfectly fine. So it's just kind of brings up the question, what is it? Because what's the issue? Because the man just can't find any consistency at all. I mean, I was talking about him last week having a Houston Harden type game. You obviously talked about in the Celtics game there, you had a good game, but it just seems to be stop, start from a guy that used to be the most consistent player in the NBA. So I don't know, potentially the easy way out is just saying, obviously, Joe Harris, Kyrie Irving not being on the court is having a big effect on Harden. Floor spacing has been a massive issue for him. He's obviously having to change his role once again. He changed his role when he came from Houston to Brooklyn, and he's more of a true point guard. Maybe he's struggling to adjust back to being that guy that needs to score. But in terms of turnovers, it's always been a big part of his game, just because he's got the ball in his hands so often. But we've just seen a carelessness from James Harden that we've never seen before, and it has been really disappointing. And you just hope that he does find some form of consistency soon, because it has had a big impact on these losses that we've had recently.
It's one of those, you just see a lot of, whether it be a missed call from the ref or an errant pass, you just see a lot of shrugging and waving of the hands from James Harden, which, like you say, it's like he's annoyed and frustrated at something. I heard him say somewhere online that he's still struggling to know when to flick the switch between facilitator and scorer. So obviously coming into this season with all the uncertainty about Kyrie Irving joining the team, as you quite rightly say, he's come in from Houston as a scorer. Now he spent last year as a point guard. Now has he gone back as a scorer or a facilitator? And it's like, well, if he's not doing the facilitating, who else is going to do it? And then if he's just doing that, then we need to help scoring as well. So it is tricky, I think. And as the rotation gets clearer, I hope he's just going to find his feet and he's going to understand or better understand his role in terms of what he's got to do. But yeah, it was really, really strange because, like you say, it's just like so many turnovers, but so many assists, and then so many rebounds, but so many. There were two really, really bad ones where I think he was at the top of the key. DeAndre Bembry was at the elbow or something, or at just on the corner of the 3-point line, and Bembry cut to the basket, but at the same time he cut, Harden passed it where he was standing. And that happened a couple of times, and it was just like, that's just miscommunication. And another time, like you said, he just bounced it off his foot and it went out, and he's just sort of trotted over towards it and stuff. So it's just visibly, it looks like lack of effort or lack of caring, but obviously there's more to that because he's a professional and an MVP caliber player. So hopefully it will iron itself out soon. But yeah, it was a pretty horrible. It wasn't a horrible loss. It was just a frustrating one because we were down by as many as 20, then cut to the lead to 5 before halftime, before going down almost 25 in the second and only losing by 6. And it was all these self-enforced sort of errors. So it's not like the Suns beat us. It's the fact that we beat ourselves, which was incredibly important, like you say, when we're trying to make a statement against these teams that are on red hot form that we could potentially be seeing in a lengthy playoff run. The Suns were on a second night of a back-to-back, and although they didn't travel because it was against the Knicks, I was hoping for like that kind of fourth quarter fizzle out, and where that did kind of come, I think the Nets sort of, if it was an 18-minute quarter, it would have been all right. But I think the Suns kind of got themselves ahead so much. Obviously, Chris Paul and Devin Booker played absolutely phenomenally, so no taking it away from them. But yeah, the 20 turnovers was horrid, mostly unforced, like you say. We shot 30% from free as well, which is pretty woeful for this Brooklyn Nets team. We're normally a lot higher than that. I guess chalk that up to good defense, like you say, but we made them look like absolute world beaters. And we gave up 20 points off turnovers. And I'm no Carol Vorderman, but 20 is more than 6. So we absolutely could have won that game had it not been for that. And it seems to be a bit of a theme for this season, but we shall see. And that's it for the game recaps. We're going to look ahead now, and then the first one we're going to go to is Wednesday, the 1st of December. 12:30 a.m. and it is the Battle of New York, the Knicks. Then we travel to Minnesota to take on D'Angelo Russell, who's looking pretty tasty at the moment, on Saturday, and we're going to the Timberwolves again, a 12:30 tip, before heading off to Chicago. Welcoming Chicago on the Sunday, so back to back, which could be a bit sticky. But yeah, gentlemen, how do you see the week ahead falling?
Yeah, definitely a fun week of games, and obviously a nice stretch of home games again, for our guys to get back into winning form. I mean, I say that I talked about last week like it was a poor week, and we still went 2-1, so you can't really complain too much. But I'd like to see us getting 3 wins again, because I always feel so much better when we do, and we have a nice clean sweep. But in terms of this week, I do expect 3 close games. And when I say close games, it really wouldn't surprise me if we see a couple of overtimes during these games. 3 just really gritty teams that know how to win and know how to turn up against good teams. I mean, the next game, it's always a back and forth game. It just has that atmosphere that it doesn't really matter who's on the court at the time. It's just a case of who wants it the most. And it's been like that for a while, especially last season. We saw some fantastic games against the Knicks. You can talk about all of them, they were just fantastic games. I mean, obviously Julius Randle chucking a chair. I'd love to see him do that again because that was just great watching. And obviously, we just want to beat the Knicks so we can join the Twitter train of our social account tweeting Bing Bong, because I think that'll be one of the most retweets the Nets will see this year. So, yeah, looking forward to that one. Then, obviously, yeah, we've got the back-to-back of Timberwolves and the Bulls. T-Wolves had a fantastic overtime win against the Sixers the other night, thanks to D'Angelo Russell, who has really kind of hit his form again, and potentially the best form we've seen him in since he was in Brooklyn. So really fun, good game. Looking forward to that one. And then the Bulls, obviously they beat us already this year. We know they're a really talented team, and they can cause us a lot of problems. But I'm going to say 3-0. I think we'll go 3-0 this week. As I say, no blowout wins for the Nets. 3 really hard games, but 3 must-watch games, because I think we're going to be treated to some really fun basketball this week.
I'm of the same opinion of you that it's going to be a very fun week and a very kind of tight fought week for the Nets, but I'm not quite as positive when it comes to my prediction for how we're going to do. I'm going to say we're going to go 2-1 rather than 3-0, and my thinking behind this is, I mean, I think we'll beat the Knicks. We beat them every time we faced them last season. That was including the game we've had 7 players available due to the Harden trade that was moments away from happening. They started the season really well, to be fair to them, but you just have to look at the recent performance against the Lakers. Went 25 points up against them to bottle it, and that was without LeBron. So surely, with us having KD and Harden there, we should be beating them no bother. And yeah, like Aidan says, would love to see a bing bong tweet from the Nets. Then moving on for the T-Wolves, they've really found their form. They're really, for a team that have been one of the worst teams in the league for the past few seasons, that they've not got much going for them. But recently they have, winning 6 of the last 7. And like Aidan says, absolutely amazing performance against the Sixers. One where they really didn't expect it. I know a few of their guys, I think it was D'Lo, had said after the game, like, there's guys sitting out of other games that can come back and kind of beat down on us. But like, it was kind of like payback in a sense. D'Lo really showed up, and we kind of missed him last time we faced off against him. So it'll just be lovely to see D'Lo again. But still feel like we should be beating them despite their good form. And then obviously the second game of the back-to-back against the Bulls. And this is where I think we're going to fall. We dropped the game against the Bulls last time we faced them. We were well beaten by them. They were just a much better team on the day. And I think, like Aidan says, and like I said, it's going to be a tight kind of week. And we might be coming into that off the back of an overtime game with the T-Wolves. So might make things quite difficult against the Bulls. We might end up resting someone. So yeah, I mean, we need to wait and see. I'd love to see us go 3-0, but I think I'm going to say 2-1 instead.
Yeah, I think I'm basically copying you exactly, Cammy. The Knicks, I don't talk about the Knicks anymore. I don't know if you've noticed me on Twitter. I used to go on a bit about the Knicks on Twitter and things like that, but I've decided I'm better than that. So I can talk about the Knicks now we're playing them. Do you know what I mean? And the Knicks versus the Nets is circled in the Knicks calendar the moment the schedule comes out. Those lot could miss the play-ins, but would be buzzing about the season if they beat us. It's, you know, it's their Super Bowl, it's their FA Cup final. So they're going to be up for it. You know, chairs flying, notwithstanding. This could come back to bite me if they do beat us. But I think, you know, this season so far is showing that, you know, last year was a fluke, and they're reverting back to their lowly, stupid, terrible standards where they belong. So I really, really do. If our Nets can't get up for this game, then I'll be really unhappy. But I think it's a big fat dub against the Knicks. Like you say, I was just looking where the Timberwolves stand, and they're 7th in the West, and that's nothing to be sniffed at. You know, they're above teams like LA, the Lakers, and above Memphis. So you know, they're a serious team. You can't discount them like you could in previous seasons. So that's going to be a tough one again. I think it's going to be a gritty one that we grind out a win, and then having Chicago the next day. I think primarily there's going to be rest. and because they're such a good team this season, I think I'm gonna side with you, Cammy, and I'm gonna go 2-1. But that loss coming against Chicago. But it remains to be seen. They might surprise us, and we could come away with a sweep, which would be lovely. That's all we've got. Well, that's all the stuff we've got prepared. We're going to go through to some listener questions this week. Big thanks to everyone that has sent in the questions. Firstly, a very short, sweet one, which we have gone over, but just to sum up your thoughts from Theo from our Discord and the Met the Criteria podcast. What the fuck do we do without Joe Harris for 4 to 8 weeks? I feel like we've covered it, but if there's any final thoughts you want to make Theo feel better. I
think just to reiterate the fact that we've managed to be all right without him, and that's coming from a big Joe Harris stan. As much as that pains me to say that, we have still managed. Could we certainly do with Joe Harris in the team? Absolutely. But like we said, Patty Mills has stepped up. We've got Lamarcus Aldridge doing absolute bits. Granted, he's not the 3-point shooter that Joe Harris is, but then we're getting points from the mid-range. So, yeah, like I said earlier on, hopefully he's kind of back near the 4-week mark rather than the 8-week mark. But he's certainly going to be missed. But let's not kind of just get bunged down by that, because that can only lead to bad things. Let's focus on the guys we do have available. Let's celebrate the continued good form of DeAndre Bembry, and who knows, in the next 4 to 8 weeks we might have another star to sing about that we weren't expecting to.
Yeah, I just think we need to continue to build on what we've done in the last few weeks, and not all of it's been good, but I guess it's a time to learn as well, and see the guys that we've got in the rotation, as Cammy says. Obviously the benefits of Harris being out, more minutes for Cam Thomas, for him to raise his game, and more minutes for guys like Patty Mills and DeAndre Bembry in the starting 5, which just gives us time to find out who our best starting 5 is. And obviously we talked about James Harden, who's had some poor form. I guess this time's is time for him to learn at the moment and to adjust his game. And then when we do get Joe Harris back, it'll just make him even better. So hopefully, if he can kind of adjust his game at the moment, when Joe comes back, we'll see MVP Harden back in the team.
Nice. Joe Harris is a known commodity within the Nets organization. He's the longest tenured Net on this team. We know who Joe is. We know what he can do. We know how special he is. So while we've still got some figuring out to do with the rotations, I think, like you guys say, with Cam having some more minutes, with everyone else being able to grab kind of more minutes, it's not the end of the world. Patty Mills is filling that 3-point sniper gap nicely. So yeah, just to echo what you guys say, Theo, it's going to be okay, mate. It's going to be okay. He's going to go away. He's going to come back better, and it's going to be. This isn't the first time I've referenced Lord of the Rings on this podcast, but it's going to be like that moment in the Two Towers when Gandalf just comes out over the hill mid battle, and he just messes people up. He's going to come through in the new year, and all of a sudden it's going to be vintage Joe Harris. 59% from free, and Joey Buckets is going to return sooner rather than later, so don't you worry. Secondly, we've got, this is an interesting one from Tyler, again from our Discord. Why is our physio department so overzealous with injuries? So how I took this was, why are all our injured players out for so long? I think if that's fair, but you guys, you can feel free to take a crack at it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't see as many compliments for our performance team nowadays as you saw a couple of years ago. I mean, personally, I do think they are massively overrated, and you could put a lot of the trouble we've had over the last few years down to bad luck. But I mean, at the end of season review that Sean Marks would have had with them last year, if you had to grade them, it has to be an F, because that's one of the worst years for injuries I've seen for a team of all time. And of course, it happened to our biggest star, so it couldn't have been more unfortunate. But I mean, in terms of why they're so kind of overzealous with injuries, I guess there's a slight cockiness there. We mentioned it a lot last year that we do have that star power there, that they felt that they could potentially leave guys out for slightly longer and and not feel like they need to rush them back to get them into the team. So maybe they feel that they can take their time a bit more because they feel that they've got other guys who can compensate. But at the same time, that screwed us over last year because obviously we kept some guys out for maybe longer than they could have done. Obviously, we heard Steve Nash say last year, I think he said, Kevin Durant could probably come back now, but we're not rushing him back. And then by the time we get to the playoffs, we had a team that hadn't played together, and we looked like a team that hadn't played together for the minutes that we actually saw on the court with that team. So I don't know. You can slate them. Obviously, we're not medical professionals. The thing with Joe Harris's injury is quite weird that it's taken 2 weeks to go down, but you made a good point, obviously, with swelling and things like that. But you do need to remember that they aren't trying to jeopardise the team, and they are trying their best, and maybe they're just not very good at their job, so who knows?
I mean, there's taking things carefully and wanting to be absolutely safe. Then there's the Nets medical team who, as we know, are notorious for their handling of injuries, whether that's good or bad, whatever kind of side of the fence you're on. Now, like Aidan says, last season there were so many injuries, and I mean, like James Harden managed to force his way back, and how he managed to convince the medical department to let him play with like 1.5 legs, I don't know. Whether that was them just going, right, well, there's nothing to lose now, we've kind of got to let it in, or maybe that's why they're back to being really overzealous again, and it is we've seen what happened last time and really shouldn't have done that. Ultimately, we're not medical professionals. These guys really do know what they're doing, as much as we'll maybe poke fun at them and say, why are you keeping him out? He's stubbed his toe, why, and whatnot. But yeah, it's strange, and part of me wonders, is this just because we are so focused on the Nets? Are other teams' medical staff just as bad? Are they just doing similar, but we're just not really paying attention to it? It's certainly annoying as a fan. You want to see the stars playing. You just want to see the team playing in general. Like Aidan says, again, last season we've barely seen that best team. We've barely seen the Scary Hours trio. For ages, they played about a handful of games together just between injuries. And yeah, there's obviously something going wrong that's resulting in all these injuries, whether it's the tempo we're playing at, the way we're practicing, I don't know, but certainly needs to be reviewed at the end of the season again if we're still picking up as many injuries. You look at kind of Nicholas Claxton's injuries. Granted, his recent illness isn't something that can be controlled, but just the kind of multiple niggling injuries he's had throughout his time, you've just got to question, this is a young guy who's really struggling and shouldn't really be injury prone, yet he seems to be. So yeah, lots of questions, and I doubt we'll ever really get the answers we're all hoping for.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because I think the worst thing you'd want to see is if a player, so say Joe Harris was out, they say, he's going to be out 4 to 8 weeks, and he comes back after 3. And on the first game back, he rolls his ankle again, and he's done for the season. So that's the worst thing you want. So I'm not actually too mad about them sort of being erring on the side of caution. I don't think there's anyone where it's been like, if there were people just sort of, you're seeing them train and they're going 5-on-5 and they're doing full speed reps and they're just on the sidelines in their street clothes being like, I think I'm good to go, but they're kind of keeping me out just to be safe. I don't know if there's much of that going on. So like you say, it's just maybe we're just too dialed in and we're too keen to see everyone play. But then on the flip side, this could be completely wrong. And I don't know if I'll get in trouble for kind of saying it, but I'm not sure if it's the Nets medical team that pulled the plug on Lamarcus Aldridge's season last year. And now went away and got a second opinion, and now all of a sudden he can play. So I don't know is that down to the Nets organization or is that down to another medical team? I'm not quite sure, but just another thing to bear in mind. But yeah, I think if you're going to have one extreme or the other, where they keep people out too long or they don't keep people out long enough, you want to go on the former of that. But yeah, it is incredibly, incredibly annoying because, we've got all this potential and we've not quite realized it yet. But once we win a chip, all these kind of details will fizzle away into insignificance. But there we go. I mentioned it earlier, but the time is now. Our last listener question for this pod comes from our Discord. Elliot from Hoopin' and Luton says, should we have dropped Clax and signed Boogie beaten by the Bucks again. So weird one. So obviously we've touched on Nick Claxton, we've touched on our bigs. Should we have moved him, and should we have made Demarcus Cousins one of our targets?
No, given his injury history and the Nets.
Talking injury histories, Jesus.
Yeah, there's not a chance this man's getting out the kind of medical treatment room with his injury history under the net. So there's no point. To be more positive, he would have certainly brought a lot of experience with the way both Blake and Aldridge kind of proved a lot of people wrong. A lot of folk had said they were finished. Yes, Blake's not been great this season, but particularly last season, like we say, was phenomenal. Blake and Aldridge have managed to both kind of roll back the years in a sense at the Nets, and you wonder, could Boogie have done that with us? Would our overzealous kind of medical team have maybe helped Boogie prevent another injury? You don't know. I can certainly understand why the Nets and many other teams steered clear of him. It's a big risk to take for a guy who's had so many serious injuries. But even if we did take him, one of the last folk I'd drop him for would be Clax. Clax has his own injury issues, like we know, but he's got a lot of upside and could ultimately be flipped for something decent if we decide that he's maybe not worth the constant dealing with the injuries. That there's certainly a player in there with lots of potential, and yeah, we could flip that, but I'm not so convinced you could do the same for a 31-year-old battered and bruised Boogie Cousins. As good as Boogie was a few years ago, but I don't think he's the kind of guy we need.
Yeah, I certainly don't think we should drop Clax regardless. I mean, I potentially looking at that wrong, potentially drop from the rotations what Elliot's meaning, but in terms of just kind of releasing him, I assume that if they were to ever get rid of Clax, he'd get traded because he certainly has got some value there. But I mean, I'd probably take Boogie on the Nets. You just need to watch the Nets like this year. And again, we're getting absolutely dominated by a different big man each night. I don't know about you, but I thought Boogie was on a team. When I saw it come out, I was like, I'm sure he's with someone. But that's probably down to the fact that he's played for about 10 teams in the last 5 years. So, I mean, I was having a quick look around the different big men, the teams that we may face in the playoffs, and I'd say the Bucks, Sixers, Lakers, Warriors, and the Suns all have two big men that are better than all of our big men. And I think they're going to dominate us in the playoffs regardless. And I really hope it doesn't play a factor. But I don't know, I think Elliot potentially thinks we should have done this. And personally, if there's a big man available, I would have him in a heartbeat. But evidently the Nets don't want a big man in the team because they could have had him for the last 3 months if they wanted someone there. And they could have had a range of big men in the league. I think the Sixers have got 3 big men now that probably could have played a factor on this Nets team with the 2 guys that they brought in the off-season. So, yeah, it's frustrating. You mentioned it earlier, Matt. I hate seeing the Nets get bullied on the boards because it's been an issue for so long. And I just think they're trying to force small ball and make it successful. So bringing in a guy like Boogie who can get rebounds, who can shoot the free, and yeah, he has had a poor injury record, but maybe it would have been a good move, but the Nets wouldn't have made it because they don't want to sign a big man, and hopefully that's not going to damage us long term.
It's one of those, I think in my head I completely understand the allure of a Demarcus Cousins because he's a big old body who in your head, he can grab rebounds and he can be a big sort of defensive presence in the paint. But just looking, and he's tried this ring chasing experiment before, signing 1-year contracts. 2019 he signed with the Warriors, 2020 he signed with the Lakers, 2020 sort of last year he signed with the Clippers, and now he signed with the Bucks. So it's like, if it didn't work, if he didn't move the needle for all those other teams that were kind of ring chasing, does it really, there's got to be something that, I don't understand about why it's not working. And he's got to have lots of downside to go with the potential upside as well. And I think there's an argument where it's like, could we use him in the playoffs? Maybe. Would we use him in the playoffs over Claxton? They almost, although they kind of played the same position, we use bigs differently than we've almost evolved past a Demarcus Cousins type. I think Demarcus Cousins isn't as mobile as, obviously, I was going to say as your average big, but certainly not as mobile as Nick Claxton. And I think, if Nick Claxton gets that chemistry with James Harden going, he could be way better threat, like a lob threat on offense as well. So obviously it's one of those, for all we know, Boogie's going to absolutely ball out on the Bucks and they're going to stink us out of the playoffs. But yeah, I'm not too fussed about missing out on Demarcus Cousins. And for the last couple of years, Nick Claxton has shown signs of being really good, but he hasn't strung it together. He did have a poor start to the start of this season, but that was a lot of illness going on, and trying to sort of find his place in a roster that did have quite a bit of change. But yeah, I'm good with where we are. And that, on that bombshell, that is it. Just all that's left to say is a big thanks to Aidan and Cammy, as ever. And thanks to you guys for listening and watching along with us. If you like what we do, then the best way you can help us is to like, rate, review the podcast, subscribe to us on YouTube, and share this episode on social media. Any help we can get to grow the audience would be much appreciated. Also, obviously, with Joe going down and Blake out of the rotation, the Blue Collar Boys now have only one player active. So you could help support us by buying yourself a Blue Collar Boys t-shirt from our merch store. The link is in our Twitter bio. And that's it. That's all we got time for today. So we'll see you next week.